It's HPR, member-supported Hawaii Public Radio and All Things Considered. I'm Dave Lawrence, and we are thrilled to be spending some time with the guy that we had on the show last year. He was a whole lot of fun. It was his first appearance at the Blue Note Hawaii, Lee Ritenour. He's back at the Blue Note through Sunday, and look at that. He's spending some more time with us. How you doing? Good to see you, man.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us, and we're just glad to be back here. It's a great club, and, of course, it's Hawaii. What are you going to say?
Right. That's what we were just saying. You can't argue when they book you there. Oh, we got to play Hawaii. Damn. So this time around, give a little plug for who's in the band, and from what I understand, it includes a person with a special relationship to you, too.
Yeah. My son, Wesley Ritenour, is playing drums. He's 24 now. He's been gigging with me a lot. He actually was at the Blue Note with me the first time that we played here. And so he's been around the world with me, literally, and doing a whole bunch of other stuff, too, so I'm really proud of him. He's playing great. And, you know, the interesting thing with drums is that your band is only as good as your drummer is. So I had the fortune and the good luck to work with some of the greatest drummers in the world. And, you know, Vinnie Colaiuta, Dave Weckl, Steve Gadd, Harvey Mason, all these fantastic legendary drummers, Sonny Emery, Will Kennedy, you know, the list goes on and on. Chris Coleman, and so...
Big shoes for him to fill.
So it was funny, you know, Wes grew up since he was 5 years old playing drums, and he was around all these people, and for the longest time, you know, I had offered him a gig, and he said, "No, Dad, I don't want to play in New York yet," you know, and I said, "What do you mean?" And no, you know, and he was very, you know, very serious about wanting to be ready, but he's been ready and playing incredible for a long time now.
How long have you guys played together? When do you first have that moment where you're like, you know, this is something that you're developing here? Because I can imagine you want it to happen, but it's another thing when he begins to have chops, I guess.
Well, you know, the thing about supporting family members when they're musicians and encouraging them, that happens in, you know, a lot of families, just like it does with sports or music or any other thing that the kids are interested in. And Wes was interested in drums. Actually, when he was 5 years old, I asked him, I said, "So do you want to play a musical instrument?" He said, "Yeah, I want to." And I said, "You want to play saxophone?" "No." "You want to play trumpet?" "No." "You want to play piano?" "No." You want to play guitar? And then he said, at 5, he said, "Why would I play guitar? You play guitar." And then I said, "What do you want to play?" He said, "Drums." And it's been drums ever since. So we have, you know, did as much as we could to support him, just like my parents did. But, you know, I never wanted to push him to do anything he didn't want to do. But he just fell in love with it. You know, once you get the disease of something, you know, you get the passion and the love for it. You know, there's no going backwards, and it doesn't matter who gets in the way. You know, and fortunately, he got the bug for music, and he's 24 hours music. So that's what can you say?
Look at you in the mirror. Isn't that cool? We could do our own viewfinder on this thing. Well, I guess the reason when I think about him, and I think about what you just said about not putting pressure on somebody, letting them evolve, and when they have that talent, you want them to turn into the person that they want to be. You don't want to force something on them. When we think about your own youthful side, and just talking about Wes, we flash back to you. At 16, there's not a lot of cats who, when you look at their resume or their profile, their bio online, I guess that's a better way of looking at it, that they would end up doing a recording session for what would be a major recording artist of the time, which was the Mamas and the Papas. And so 16 years old, which is like barely old enough to drive. How does something like that happen? Try to describe for us where you got that inspiration yourself at such an early age.
Well, I started playing when I was 8. By the time I was 12, I was totally immersed in it, totally serious, and told my dad I wanted to be a professional musician, whatever that meant, because we didn't know what that meant because none of us in the family were professional musicians. And yet I said, I want to do this for my life. I loved it so much. And so they were very encouraging, very helpful. And back in those days, in the you know, I'm an old dude now, so mid-60s, late 60s, there were... everybody was doing live gigs. You know, you could do weddings, you could do bar mitzvahs, parties, jam sessions, demos, church stuff. Because there was no computers, you know, for everybody, and there was no, you know, there was records, of course, but there was no really music that everybody needed live musicians. So I was immersed in jazz. I was immersed in rock because of the guitar, and both things were equally strong. Hendrix and Clapton and Beck were coming, and meanwhile Wes Montgomery and Kenny Burrell and Jim Hall and Joe Pass and Jim, all these, Barney Kessel, all these great jazz guitarists were there, and then B.B. King was there on blues, and every field had Segovia was there on classical guitar. Just every field had an amazing guitarist. So I was immersed in all of that, and pretty soon this group came along, and they were older than me, but they had heard about me, and they said, you can play jazz and you can play rock. We want to, we're a jazz group, but we want to hire a singer and do rock. And so we did that, and somehow they got turned on to John Phillips from the Mamas and the Papas, and they said, John's going to produce our demo. So we went up to Bel Air in Los Angeles and Beverly Hills there, and it was right out of a storybook. It was this huge mansion, and John had a full-on studio upstairs in his second level, and we walk in, and it's this amazing studio, and we cut the demo for this group that I was in, and the demo really never went anywhere, but John said, man, you play pretty nice. You want to hang out tomorrow night and play again? And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, we're doing a session for my group. I said, you mean the Mamas and the Papas? And he said, yeah. He said, come on back tomorrow night. I said, so I came back, and sure enough, it was the Mamas and the Papas. And it was a young bass player at that time named Leland Sklar. Now, Leland Sklar went on to record and play bass on everybody's records and had a long career with James Taylor and Phil Collins. And then the drummer was Ed Green, who went on to record all the records for Barry White and Motown. And so those two guys were, I think I was 16 and they were probably 19 or 20. And so I looked for that record for years and years, thinking, oh, I'm going to be on a Mamas and Papas. But I heard later that John Phillips would record every other day, and he just recorded all this stuff. And maybe the record someday made it out. I don't really know. But it was in the resume, and it was very cool. And later I had my own studio at my house starting in 1985, and ever since I was 16 and I saw John Phillips' studio, I said, someday I'm going to have a studio in my house.
So in that way, it probably played a role.
Oh, big time.
Right, influencing you, like, I want one of these to have to mess around on. And I don't want to take too much of his time because he's got to get down there and do one more set. But one other one, because we started talking about your son, and you gave us such a background into this youthful thing, which is it's incredible and a lot of people, that's that early childhood development. Sometimes people have it. And real quick, how did you get it at 8? Who put the thing in your hand first at 8 that you said, like?
Well, I think I for some reason I had this thing with the guitar when I was 5 or 6. I was getting a broomstick handle, putting a couple of nails, and stretching rubber bands. So the vibration of the string, somehow I liked that. Okay. And we, in the family, in the Ritenour family, we had one other professional musician. He was a bugler in the Civil War, and we actually have papers on that. And my grandmother played piano, my dad played piano, and the family loved music, and so somehow it was in the blood, and fortunately I had parents that just were all about encouraging it, so that was very cool.
No, that's huge. I mean, okay, that's what I figured it had to be, some kind of encouragement. Okay, final story also takes place as a teenager. You're backing Lena Horne and Tony Bennett at 18. So at 16, you've already heard this incredible story, the mansion, the studio that now makes him want to have his own studio. How do you end up with those cats?
Well, and I recommend this when I'm giving advice to parents about their kids and to young musicians that are coming out of college. You try to associate with other professional players that or players just a little bit above you or a lot above you, and you try to hang out with those guys and get to know them, not just from a fan point of view, but really from a mentoring point of view. Mm-hmm. And there was this incredible jazz guitarist that I loved named Gabor Szabo. He was from Hungary, and he was very unique, and he worked a lot with Lena Horne, and he loved Lena, and Lena loved him, and she always featured the guitar up in her shows, and she was an amazing lady, not only gorgeous and way ahead of her time of cutting the racial barriers, and just an amazing woman, and a real pioneer. And so, and my family used to play, my mom and dad used to play records with Lena, so I knew her from an earlier age. And the same thing kind of happened with me working with Peggy Lee when I was 18. And so Gabor couldn't do a gig, and I had been hanging out with him a little bit because I had met him at a club, and he befriended me, and I went up and played with him at his house, and somehow he recommended me, and he couldn't do the gig, and he showed me the book, and I got the gig, and it was at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion, which was at the time the big theater downtown Los Angeles. It was an orchestra, and then, and it turned out to be with Lena and Tony Bennett, and what I didn't know was that she featured the guitar so much is that the guitar was sitting on I'm sitting on a stool, right pretty much next to Lena, and talking about some stress, but it's like every young musician who prepares gets eventually that break, and you just have to be ready in your schooling, in your studies, in your practicing, in your all the homework you've done to deliver enough not to get nervous. Not to say that I wasn't nervous that night, but whenever the guitar was in my hands, because I had spent a lifetime playing it, then I was ready, and I was going to make sure I delivered.
How many tunes did Tony do with you guys?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't remember, but I think he came out. I think it was almost half the show, because he and I got to meet him that night, and then later I recorded on his records, and he's still phenomenal. It's like, and when Sinatra said that Tony was his favorite singer, it's like there's no joke about that, because Tony's been healthy and gigging. He's like B.B. King, and I worked a lot with B.B., and those guys are talking about inspiration. Chick Corea, who's coming again to the Blue Note here, this guy is ridiculous. Those kind of guys, they tour until they drop.
It's like it is in the genes with cats like that, huh? Especially Tony.
Yeah, oh my God, he's something else.
'Cause I know what you're talking about. It's just like this guy is like Teflon. So.
Oh, he's amazing.
And so are you. It's Lee Ritenour, and we have plenty of stories for the next visit. So we're going real slow into your catalog of stuff. Hope you had fun. Thanks for doing this.
We'll do that. Thank you, buddy.